Greetings everyone, my name is Dobre Florian-Robert, and to start the presentation, I worked as a software engineer at Bitdefender, working as a C++ engineer on the scanning engine. I am currently a cybersecurity consultant at KPMG. I am mostly doing pen testing. I am part of the CTF team Rec the Line, and we like to think that we're decent, not great, not terrible. We have some CTFs that we place first at, international contests. I am a member of Team Romania, as you could probably guess, at the European Cybersecurity Contest. And I am also a computer science student, even though I don't attend university as much as I would like to. My passions are cryptography, recently binary exploitation, reverse engineering, writing code, and fuzzing random stuff. Who doesn't like to fuzz random stuff? And pen testing. About the contest, it begins with a national selection phase in which you have to compete against multiple people online on a Jeopardy type of CTF. And it continues with 1 or maybe 2 boot camps, depending on how the organizers feel. And the boot camps take place in a very secret location. It's actually next to the Brand Castle. And once you make it through the boot camps, you reach the finals. And the finals are hosted by a chosen country. It's always a different country, part of the countries that are participating. And there are teams of 10 contestants, at least 5 juniors. There can be more, and a maximum of 5 seniors. There are 20 plus countries, at least in the last edition of ECSC, which ended recently. And usually there are 2 or more days of no sleep. The format. ECSC usually comes in Jeopardy, attack or defense, although there have been many attempts at attack and defense, many of which failed. Sometimes hardware hacking and sometimes lockpicking. This year this happened again with the bandstand challenge presented by British Telecom. And the challenges. You have the usual CTF challenges. You have binary exploitation, web exploitation, you have reverse engineering, and forensics, and last but not least, cryptography. And they usually sound like this. You have to recover what nobody else can recover, basically. And yeah, they make it sound impossible. About this edition of European Cybersecurity Challenge, the venue was the Palace of the Parliament. It was a really nice venue, although many complained about the fact that there's no ventilation system. So if somebody doesn't take a shower, you're gonna smell it from a far enough distance. The time, it was between the 9th and the 11th of October, and the setting, it looked like this. You can see we're in the middle down there. It's totally not a cherry-picked photo. And this is how the first day panned out. There were 18 challenges. There were each harder than the other. Some issues with the flags, obviously. When you're organizing an international event, there are going to be issues with the flags. Some people forgot to put the right flags in, so yeah. And a lot of drinks and the classic Romanian food, which didn't miss from this edition, mici și sarmale. And guess what? We managed to solve every challenge at the end of day 1, and we were just 2nd place behind Italy, who had another challenge scheduled on the day. We had that on the 2nd day. And here I'm going to present one of the challenges, which was, in my opinion, the hardest one. It was a penetration testing challenge, and it looked like this. By the description, you were given an IP and an SSH credentials on a Kali Linux box that was in an internal network. And the architecture looked like, the infrastructure looked like 3 VMware boxes, and you were one of them. There were 2 malicious, 2 machines online on the network. One of them was the gateway to which your internet configuration was pointed to, and another was an endpoint. There was one Windows machine. The endpoint was connecting to the router, which was running Windows, and the router was running Linux. And on the Windows server, there was an Apache server with a PHP that said, we just made a backup at insert date here. Basically, it was a backup service. And this was making backups on the router. And the Windows machine had the RDP port open, and since it was Windows 7, I thought this is going to be a blue keep challenge, although it might sound weird. I tried multiple times to use Metasploit or custom exploits to exploit it, but it did not work for some reason. It would crash the machine because the bug was still there, but the exploits didn't work out of the box. So I went on to think of other attack vectors. A common attack when you're placed inside an internal network is to try ARP spoofing, which basically redirects all the traffic to you. So you can either forward it to the intended destination, or you can just read it and don't let it pass. Then you can try to intercept the traffic and interpret it. After using ARP spoofing, you can set up a Wireshark instance and basically inspect what the intended client was sending. And this is what could be seen in the capture. There was significant MySQL activity, which would make sense because there was a backup server and the client on the Windows machine was trying to upload files to the gateway, which was running Linux. And the thing with MySQL is authentication is done with a challenge, which is basically a hash of the password along with a salt. So if you don't have the right salt, it's very hard to brute force the challenge. You need to gather the correct hash. You have to reproduce the hash of the password by multiple XORs against possible salts. And this is why retrieving the hash and cracking it proved difficult. Aside of that, it turned out that the password was a sequence of random symbols, so no password dictionary would have found it. And just as I've said, the Windows machine tries to make a backup over MySQL to the gateway. Now, there are several things you can do. You can man in the middle the connection post-authentications. What does this mean? After the Windows machine authenticated on the Linux server, you can try to stop sending any queries from the client and send your own queries. We tried that with a module named man in the middle MySQL on GitHub, and it didn't work out of the box. And we spent a lot of time trying to write a custom proxy for this type of challenge, and it didn't really work out. And one of my teammates came with an awesome suggestion, which I didn't know about at the time: redirect connections to a rogue MySQL server. So you are ARP spoofing the entire network, and you are impersonating the MySQL server running on the gateway. And this is very curious. I've already said you cannot crack the hash because it's going to take millions of years. You already know that if you are a client, you can request data from the server using load data INFILE. But what you probably didn't know, and I myself didn't know, is that the server can request data from the client. And this is a standard actually in MySQL, and it is enabled by default as far as I remember. Load data local INFILE is a type of query that the client sends to the server, in which it specifies a file that it wishes to upload to the server. The server then sends a TCP packet back to the client with the same path that the client sent, in which it requests to send it the actual file, and the client then proceeds to upload the contents of the file to the server. And what this type of attack does, the rogue MySQL server, it lets the client send whatever requests it wants, but it sends the packet that it wants to read arbitrary files on the client's machine. And with this, we read the configuration and the files in the Apache that we have on Windows, and we managed to read the password for the MySQL database with which we could connect. And we enumerated and read the databases and the fields, and it turned out that the flag was there. This was a very interesting challenge from my point of view because I learned something new. Lessons learned from day one: teamwork is key. Listen to every suggestion, as dumb as it might sound, and you will find out later why this is a thing. Google is a man's best friend. Basically, whenever you hear about an unknown term, it's best to just search it. And we used a lot of unknown at the time exploits that we later found out about using Google. Unintended solutions, they are the best. With 1 hour before the first day concluded, the organizers decided to release a reverse engineering challenge in which it turned out it was very difficult. We had 3 people who solved the Flaron challenge working on it. They tried to find the vulnerabilities in the code, tried to find the weaknesses in the encryption, and they couldn't conclude anything. And it turns out that a guy from our team just entered the username of 4 A's and the password of 80 B's, and he got the flag. Don't ask me. And you always have to think outside the box, because once you step out of the challenge setting, you can view more attack vectors, and you also have to keep a high-level perspective. Make sure you read the description entirely, read the keywords, and think of it from a simple point of view, then move on to the complicated perspective. The second day looked like this. We had even more challenges, even more meat, and even less sleep. And here is another challenge that I thought was very, very interesting. You had a 1.2 gigabytes packet capture. This is questionable design, because the challenge could have been done with like 3 megabytes of packet capture, but okay. It contains FTP data and encrypted heartbeats. And when you hear about encrypted heartbeats, you immediately think of Heartbleed. And there are 3 endpoints. There is Alice, Bob, and Clark. Alice is the server that we wish to compromise. Bob is a middleman who just wants to send encrypted heartbeats, and it hosts the responses, which are the dumps, to a FTP server to which Clark connects. And this is where you can see the FTP data. And once you recover the dumps from FTP with the T-Shark, you have to use a specific tool named HardLeech to try and extract SSL keys. Basically, how Heartbleed works is you send an encrypted heartbeat of a given content, and you set the payload size to be maximum. So when the server receives your request, it reads data from the stack and from the memory that is located on the stack at the time, and it sends whatever lies in there. And it so happened that the SSL key was lying on stack. And with this tool HardLeech, you can provide the certificate for the server, and it will retrieve you the RSA private key, which you can use to decrypt the SSL traffic. Using the SSL traffic, you can analyze the HTTP requests, because they are now in plain text, and you can recover, in this case, the administrator password, which was required for solving this challenge, but you can also do whatever you want, basically. And there have been some interesting last-minute efforts, because at the end of day 2, it was not known who was the winner. We had this challenge named Radios. It was a radio frequency challenge in which you had one device continuously sending data over the network, and it was, as far as I'm concerned, it was an ASK type modulation. Which you had to figure out by the patterns in the radio capture, and you were also given a radio module to intercept data. You had a client and a server key. The server device was communicating over AES GCM, and this is how our team was set up. One guy in this case, Trappers, wrote the interaction script with the encryption and the decryption. Another guy had to hold the antenna high, and multiple guys had to guess whatever the authors meant with their weird encryptions, which were just old ciphers. This is, again, questionable challenge design. And this is what we learned from day 2. Submit flags as soon as possible. Some teams tried to hold on to the flags and submit them later on, so they would jump from like 11th place to 3rd or 2nd. But it turns out it doesn't really work like that. It's much better to just submit everything as soon as you can. Food lasts for 3 minutes. Good luck finding anything after that time period. Italy is an extraordinary opponent. As I've said, they have been always next to us on the scoreboard, and they have been on top in the first day, and try even the dumbest ideas. And here's what I was meaning. We had a local file inclusion and arbitrary image upload challenge, in which the local file inclusion was straightforward. You had a page parameter in which you could include arbitrary files, but you also had an arbitrary image upload, in which you could upload JPEG, PNG, different types of images, and these images would be either compressed or just basically nuked in the formatting. So you couldn't include the PHP code unless you included it in the ICC profile tag in JPEG, which happened to not be compressed. And this is how we solved the challenge. First, I read Etsy password, and you could see we have a user here named ECSC. And then I thought, hey, let's try to read home ECSC flag. Maybe there's a flag there. Oh, well, there was the flag. And this is our entire write-up for the challenge. It's literally 2 requests. And yeah, this is how we solved it unintentionally. This is what I'm saying with the dumb ideas. They sometimes work. And at the end of day 2, there was uncertainty in the fact that 2 hours before the end, scoreboards were frozen and nobody knew what points they or others had. So nobody knew what the winner was. And Italy was close, as I've said, within like 400 or 500 points. And we didn't know if they had overtaken us or not, so we went to eat and have a good time, basically, and forget everything. And in the end, it happens that we came out on top with a difference of 800 or so points. And if you need any sort of proof, this is it. You can tell it's true because Romania has written it with a permanent marker. And some key takeaways: you never know enough InfoSec. As I've said, there are always research studies that you might find amazing or that you didn't know about. There are always attack vectors that you didn't know about, and there are always 0 days. Practice makes perfect, and this is where CTFs and bug bounties come into play, because you gain a lot of experience from these types of challenges. Collaborating on challenges is always fun. As I've said, working with teams, working in a team or working with somebody is always fun because you can bounce ideas back and forth, and it always helps. And to conclude this presentation, keep on hacking. Any questions?
Thank you, Robert. If you have any questions, hear the microphone.
Very good presentation. Maybe I missed the first part, but who created the challenges this year, the 18 challenges? So who created the challenges?
As it was an international contest, there were multiple organizers. We had challenges from Bit Sentinel, we had challenges from British Telecom, ENISA, CertSign, and I think that's it. Huh? Yeah, and Cyberint. There was a weird challenge. I'm not going to go into details. It was very frustrating. Any other questions?
What challenge have you spent the most time on?
The challenge that I first presented, business as usual, the pen testing challenge, because I didn't know about the rogue MySQL server exploit. And I spent a lot of time writing a proxy that would do MySQL authentication and arbitrary queries. So yeah, that didn't really work out.
And which challenge for you was the most interesting?
I think it was the heart leech one, because the one that I last presented, because I knew about the heartbeat bug, but I didn't know that you could recover the entire SSL secret with it. I didn't know it was lying on the stack or next to the stack. So
okay, so one last thing. What would be or could be your recommendations for the ones and the new blood that wants to join ECSC for the next years? Maybe it would be part of your team. I don't know.
Yeah, as Ionuț presented previously, do a lot of CTFs, spend a lot of time gaining experience through contests, maybe do bug bounties if you want to earn some cash along the way. And experience is, in my opinion, the most important, is basically the foundation, because like in chess, if you have seen a type of situation before, you know how to manage and how to solve it.
Just prioritize it a bit. Having a job and enough time, it's not an option.
Yeah.